Hi, Nuno. Thanks for inviting me to speak. And good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Since we have an international crowd, I'm very happy to be able to share some of this thoughts in regards to the Silicon Valley startup ecosystem with you this morning. So a little bit about my journey. I'm not homegrown to Silicon Valley. Actually, I spent 20 years in high school, college, and working in Boston, Massachusetts. At the time, there was a company called Digital Equipment Corporation. It was the #2 computer company behind IBM. And Digital actually established a lot of the technology that we refer to as cloud today. What Digital did was they came up with what they call mini computers, which took the IBM original mainframe and break it down into smaller computers and network them together to make it look like a huge computer. And around that time, we have 101, Highway 101, with a lot of startups and tech companies. And in the Massachusetts area, there's a highway called Route 128. And always also filled with many startups, and also especially computer companies at the time. And in 1996, because my parents actually immigrated to Mountain View, California, so I decided to move my family out to the San Francisco Bay Area. And I joined a company called NEC Corporation. And NEC at that time was one of the top 5, top 10 Intel-based PCs and PC server manufacturers. And my manager, Cookie-san, actually knows Bill Gates personally, because he told me he signed the Japanese version of DOS with Bill Gates himself. So we had a lot close, high-level relationship with Microsoft, Intel, and other companies. Then I was recruited over to Silicon Graphics Inc., or also known as SGI, which also got acquired. So Digital was acquired in 1997 by Compaq, and Compaq was acquired by HP. And SGI was also acquired by HP, I think, about 10 years ago. SGI focused mainly on Unix workstation servers. And I started a group within SGI to focus on Linux in 1999. And that was before any major computer vendors start to understand the power of open source software. So SGI, my group actually grew from 0 to $45 million in just 18 months, because we're the major computer vendor that get behind the support of open source Linux. Then during the SGI, actually, I learned how to reduce the cost of manufacturing and outsource the manufacturing to another company based out of Taiwan. And then in 2004, Inventec came and they recruited me to head up their business development and marketing for the United States. And one of the main call to fame for Inventec is, and a lot of people might not have heard about this company, just like some of the other manufacturing companies based in Asia, because they don't have a brand. Inventec built the first iPod for Apple. So, and since then, they've been also engaged with many consumer electronics, also enterprise customers. And because of the financial meltdown in 2008, global financial crisis, then I decided to branch out to start my own management consulting company, Technology Ventures Group. And out of that effort, I will engage with Intellectual Ventures, which is the largest private company with about 100,000 patent for patent licensing. And also I help a China-based company called Q360 to start their innovation center called Lab 360, focusing on startup. And also out of that, I also helped Lab 360 actually help raise a fund called Heuristic Capital that acquired the portfolio of Lab 360, which I go into a little bit more. So as I mentioned, Lab360 hardware incubator. So my background actually is electrical engineering, and I've been a longtime member of a nonprofit organization called the Institute for Electrical Electronics Engineering Association, IEEE, which has about 400,000 members in about 160 countries. So a lot of my focus actually has been around hardware, even though Silicon Valley started out as a silicon, basically semiconductor, but nowadays it's mostly on the software side. So with Labs 360, we start with one office in Santa Clara, and then we open up another office in San Francisco. And I go into that a little bit about basically there are three camps of startup based on location: San Francisco, Silicon Valley, and then across the bridge on the other side called the East Bay. The plan was to invest about $100,000 seed funding to early stage startup focusing on health, wearables, and IoT devices. One of the things that when we set up the incubator was we realized that just by ourselves, we're not providing sufficient value to the startups. So we actually went out and recruited many investors, co-investors, partners, and customers that will help our portfolio startups. And then we have basically private demo days. That's why you don't see when you Google when you try to Google, you don't see too many demo days. You probably won't find any demo days being listed because these demo days are usually by invitation only, because the focus of some of these startups are so specific. There's no, it's more effective, and for the demo days to be including pre-qualified investors who are interested in the health, IoT, and wearable to meet with the startups. I think Nuno mentioned some of the notable startups within the Lab360 portfolio. It's a company called Silk Labs. It's an AI startup company that started out building their own home monitoring device using with a lot of AI technologies. But then very quickly they got acquired by Apple because the team, the Silk Lab teams actually came out of a company called Mozilla. They have actually built an entire operating system for mobile phones, and they leveraged a lot of that know-how and came up with an idea that they can utilize the hardware platform like a mobile phone with camera processing, microphone to detection, to build a home monitoring platform, and that was quickly acquired by Apple. Another notable one is a company called Hinge Health, with the founders actually came from London and relocated to San Francisco, and they focus on they have a wearable device focused on musculoskeletal diseases. So, and they have received several follow-on rounds, and I'll go into a little bit more detail in my later on slides. And then another hardware company called Waterbit, they have basically developed wireless sensor for farming, for precision farming, and they raised an $11 million Series A, led by a Tier 1 VC called New Enterprise Associate, NEA, in Silicon Valley. So Lab360, after 3 years, basically with the parent company supporting it, want to refocus on the China market. So we decided to raise a fund called Heuristic Capital, which closed the first fund in 2017 as a U.S. fund, primarily investing in U.S. startups. And they acquired all the startup portfolio from that 360. The most notable one today is that Hinge Health recently raised Series E. So when I submit my profile last year and now, they already raised 2 more rounds. With $400 million Series E, they are now valued at $6.2 billion. So why startup around the world, globe wants to come to San Francisco and Silicon Valley? There are a few reasons. Reason number one is the amount of venture capital money that's available. So in North America as a whole, according to the Money Tree report in 2020, half the venture capital money is in North America. And also the number of deals, almost one-third, more than one-third of the deals are based in the United States. And Canada, I guess North America includes both countries. And the reason number two is the markets. U.S. In terms of consumer market, tech investment is still the largest compared to the rest of the world, with China coming up very quickly. Why? And reason number three is the other tech companies. So this is just a quick illustration of some of the very well-known companies around the world, with traditional companies like Yahoo, Cisco, Oracle, as well as the very upcoming company, Twitter, Uber, Lyft, Facebook. And the reason number four is the uniqueness of Silicon Valley, where I get to travel to speak twice in Estonia, startup conference in Estonia, Latitude 59, and also Startup Day. And I was at the Global Entrepreneur Week at Minsk, Belarus in 2019. And I travel also to Taiwan, China to speak about startups ecosystem. And the number one question is, from a lot of people, is how they can replicate Silicon Valley. Since I've been here now for more than 25 years, my observation is Silicon Valley was built originally 40, 50 years ago with the first basically venture capital company that took a lot of risk investing in semiconductor companies. So and now we're seeing the proliferation of many startups on software, social network, energy, and other electric car like Tesla. So the investment takes a long time, and what people saw now is an investment from many years ago. So and it's very difficult to replicate all these things in a very short amount of time. Excuse me. One thing about is Silicon Valley has a very diversity of people from their background and also from countries where they come from, because we have great universities where students graduating from university and then professional relocating from other states. Despite some of the rumors, not rumors, but the fact that some people are moving away from Silicon Valley or San Francisco because of the high cost of living. But we still have a lot of great talents coming at the same time, and also graduating from universities. It's a very friendly and sharing culture. Sometimes especially for people coming from outside of Silicon Valley and in countries where they are a little bit more formal in terms of in the investment community, they are very surprised how openly entrepreneurs and VC share information. And that's another way to foster more collaboration between ecosystem partners. And many new business model and disruptive ideas have been created because of that culture and the environment. And another thing is the boom and the bust is very acceptable. As a matter of fact, some of the VC, when they talk to the entrepreneurs, if they heard the entrepreneur has failed once, and actually it's not negative, actually they see that as a good experience, because then the same entrepreneur would learn from that experience, would not make the same mistakes again. Reinventing the wealth. because of the successful exits, there are many employees of like Facebook, Google, Tesla, Uber, now reinvesting some of the wealth that they have accumulated through their company's IPO into various startups. Oftentimes, people will invest in their friends and in their college friends and professional friends as an angel investors. Entrepreneurship, friendly government. Well, actually, there are, I think, other country governments now. I started to understand the entrepreneurship is important to continue expanding the business, and so there are various countries now have part of the trade officers of the consulate actually helping their startup from their countries when they enter the United States. Give you an example, Canada has a program called Corridor 100, where they rented out 2 floors of building. At the time, I don't know if they still kept it at Rework in downtown San Francisco to provide free access to startup coming from Canada to San Francisco for fundraising or customer meetings, so they don't have to separately book rooms and look for offices. The last thing is, because I lived in Boston for 20 years, so great climate. There are instances where some meetings will get canceled because of the snowstorms, now that we're in the winter season. But California, the weather is so great. So, and also, even late at night, you can actually hold meetings with potential startup and investors without being too cold. So there's the inherent geographical advantage for Silicon Valley. So another main question coming from a lot of the entrepreneurs from Europe or Asia is they want to move to San Francisco. So I'll provide some insight before they make that, to help them to make that decision. So one thing is you have to anticipate much higher salaries and compensation for your employees. Here's a list of some of the sample average employees, tech employees pay by the different tech companies. And then the other thing is the housing rent. So you can see San Francisco is very expensive to rent. And typically the monthly spending, as you can see, most of them, when the money goes to the rent. And then you have food, and then the other basic expenses. Timing. Summertime, a lot of VCs will take off on vacation. So if you plan, try to avoid the month of July and August, and also December because of the Christmas and New Year holidays. Which team members to move? So it really depends. There's no right one formula. So every company has to, every startup has to consider. But typically, I can share with you, a lot of time is the CEO who will relocate to San Francisco for maybe a month, 2 months, three months to cover a lot of different aspects: fundraising, partnership development, customer engagement, and sometimes they might even do some local hiring. But only move to San Francisco for the right reasons, and don't because it sounds good on paper saying that you have a San Francisco address for an office. So here are the 2 videos that I would recommend you to take a look by the founder of Vivino from Denmark. The reason why you should come and the reason why you should not come. It's great video and insight for other companies to look at. To make their own evaluation. Okay, final thought. If you haven't been to the San Francisco area, take a trip before you start setting up your fundraising trip to San Francisco. so that you get a feel of the environment. And also, I mentioned a thing about the camps. So because of nowadays, because traffic is much lighter, but during the normal days, the commute between San Francisco down to Silicon Valley could be as long as an hour. So to take it out, if you let's say stay in San Francisco and take meetings with VC in San Francisco, that's great. So you don't have commute. But a lot of VCs are on Sand Hill Road, which is in Menlo Park. It's about 45 minutes away. And then with traffic and parking, you probably have to spend 1 hour. So for a 1 hour meeting with a VC down in the Silicon Valley, you basically have to reserve 3 hours for a commute, including commuting time, unless you line up a bunch of meetings in one location. So you have to budget your time properly. And what's another great thing for founders from non-US company, before they come, network with others and get advice how they were able to raise funds from the United States. So you can actually learn from the best practices from them. And also, again, now with the pandemic, all the conferences are now virtual. But in the past, TechCrunch Disrupt is usually around September timeframe. And I think Startup Grind is another big conference for startups. I think it's around May. So you can plan your visit around those conferences to gain exposure through the conference, as well as your own private meetings with potential investors. And the last bullet is probably the most important. A lot of it's a chicken and egg issue. I've discussed a lot with foreign founders and foreign CEOs, and they will always say, "Now, Joseph, once I raise the money from a U.S. investor, I'll set up an office and set up a structure, everything." Unfortunately, people who control the money actually have the upper hand in negotiation. And the reason why a lot of times ended up after the meeting, they will find out that the U.S. investors most of the time will not be as comfortable to invest outside the U.S. because there are tax advantages for U.S. investor based on the IRS Section 1202 and 1244. And also now IRS actually is very stringent in terms of getting knowledge about people's investment overseas. So there's a Foreign Account Tax Compliance Act that investor has to report anything that they own more have $50,000 or more. So that's why a lot of times the proper way, when you're ready to take on U.S. investment, then just spend the investment to establish a U.S. business entity in Delaware first, and that will basically become a checkoff versus a question mark to the investors. Now, from an investor standpoint, that's why no U.S. investors, VC, will sign an NDA, because we see a lot of similar companies all the time. And now, at the end of the day, which are the criteria? So if the company is based in the U.S. doing something similar with a similar quality team versus a company based outside U.S., then the U.S. team will always have an advantage because of the reason I stated here. Also consider applying to the Bay Area Accelerator if you are early stage startups, because they provide great network of people who can mentor you, and also potential introduction to partners, customers, investors. So I think I'm coming up to the end of my slide. I thank you for allowing me to share some information with you. My company, Technology Ventures Group, is kind of like the tour guide for a startup from outside the Silicon Valley to help them to navigate. That's why you see the logo. It's to navigate this maze of how startup can be successful in fundraising, getting customers, and building their business in the United States. And feel free to email me with any questions. I'll be happy to address them.